Before we dive into this, I want to preface and say, I'm not an expert. I'm not a self-proclaimed expert in social media. I'm extremely curious, and I'm curious as to how social media intersects with our lives, and specifically our professions. If you're in the education field, then particularly in the field of education. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap of how we'll be spending our time together, I'm going to briefly share about the impact of social media that we see today. Who are our social media power users? And then how do we leverage social media for faculty? And I'll be sharing a little bit from my personal experience with my classes, and then some of the findings from the study that I've done. So hang on tight and stay engaged. Starbucks. Why do we have a picture of a cup of coffee? Well, right out of college, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, like any new college minted grad, I decided to work at Starbucks. I loved coffee. I discovered Starbucks when I was in college, particularly the caramel macchiato. And I was really curious about this new emerging Starbucks culture. And so as I got trained, and anybody here anybody worked at Starbucks? Or okay, so they actually put you through a grueling 30-hour training to be a barista. And not only how to make a sugar-free vanilla latte or an extra caramel macchiato, but actually they indoctrinate you about the culture of Starbucks. So I became a Starbucks evangelist, basically. So when Howard Schultz created Starbucks, or took over Starbucks and had them planted every 2 blocks in the United States, what he wanted was something called the third place. And this third place was neither work nor home, but this third place for people to gather and connect with one another. And so his foresight was, maybe there aren't enough places like that here in America where people can just gather and sit and talk. And so what was so phenomenal about Starbucks and then just this whole coffee culture is that's the kind of space that was being created for people, with the assumption that probably there isn't that type of space already available. So as I think about this third place, I started thinking about social media as time went on and the years went on, and how really, in my opinion, what social media has done is it's really created this third virtual place for people. Like some of you had said, it's a community, it's a place to connect, it's a way to waste time, like you might waste time at Starbucks hanging out with your friends. But currently 40% of the world regularly uses some format of social media. This is across the entire world. In Fast Company, they recently talked about how the fastest growing group of Facebook and Google+, what's Google+? Does anybody even use that? I actually do. The fastest growing group is 45 to 54-year-olds. They're moving on to Facebook, Google+, perhaps because their kids do and they want to spy on their kids. I don't know. And Twitter is experiencing the largest growth right now for users aged 55 to about 64. So I'm kind of curious what has inspired 55 plus to get onto Twitter. The University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth did a study on colleges and universities, and they found that 100% of all of their colleges and universities that they surveyed used some form of social media. So there's no way that we can escape social media. It's here to stay, it's expanding, evolving, whether or not we like it. And it's also found that 70% of faculty actually use social media. So if you're a faculty member or working somewhere in education, you probably have a Facebook account, I'm guessing, or maybe you use LinkedIn to find a different job, I don't know. But 70% of them use some form of social media, but when it comes to social media in the classroom, they actually use online videos or YouTube, as well as blogs as ways to bring social media into the classroom. So some of the biggest concerns for faculty, and I've heard this, is a concern about privacy and safety, which are very valid and legitimate concerns. So as we think about this third place, as we think about social media, what do we know about kids in social media today? When I look around, I often see the tops of heads. And kids are on social media, no doubt. They're constantly on it. It's hard to go to a restaurant without seeing kids on some sort of device, whether they're connected to social media or not. But there's this author Dana Boyd, who's a senior researcher for Microsoft Research, and she's a graduate of MIT, and she's an expert in youth and social media. And she came out with a book this year in February called It's Complicated. And essentially, it is complicated when we think about teens and young adults on social media. So what Dana Boyd did in her research, she spent 8 years researching across 18 different states with about 166 participants in their teens from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic classes, and she just wanted to get a good sense using qualitative data, interviewing these students, following them around in their lives. What is it about teens? What is it about social media? So her chapter goes through the identity kids today find in social media, privacy, bullying, addiction, the danger, so quite a plethora of different topics. But I do want to go through 3 particular ones and then transition into the research that I've been working on with students in my class. The first was, why do teens seem so strange online? Has anybody experienced that or found that? You look at their tweets or their posts, maybe of your own children, and you think, what are they thinking? Why are they so weird? And what Boyd talks about is that teens actually don't see social media as this virtual place that some of us might think about, where they have to choose to be themselves or create this alternate ego. That's not true for teens. They actually just see it as a place to gather with their friends, and they kind of balance privacy and safety at the same time with balancing humor and images. And the question of teens fabricating information, so that was an issue that came up. Teens do it because they're teens. They think it's funny. Do you remember in junior high when boys would do dumb things because it was funny? Well, teens, they do silly, funny things online because they want to get a laugh from their friends. Sometimes they would fabricate their own information because they actually think these sites have no right to ask them how much they make or what's their relationship status, so they'll just make up things that are just ridiculous. And they think that, well, you know, if I do that, then maybe my visibility online will be limited to people where they don't want them to find them online. So, you know, many adults have said, well, students are, and teens aren't able to control their privacy, but rather, what Boyd posits is actually the opposite. They do these things as a way to have agency and control over social media, rather than social media having control over them. So when we see teens act so strange online, really the intended audience matters. They're not writing for their parents or their teachers to see, they're writing for their friends, essentially. Boyd talks about this context collapse. Have you ever been to a party or thrown a party where you invite people from work and maybe a social group and then your family, and it's all of your contexts merging, and maybe you're a little bit different in the way that you posture yourself with different groups, but then all of your contexts start collapsing. That's what's happening to teens. The context that they're thinking about is for their friends, but then now they have parents and aunties and grandmas and uncles coming online, and there's this context collapse for them. They're not accounting for this audience that consists of adults, really. And then self-presentation and impression management. So, you know, they're on it, they're trying to impress their friends, they're doing funny things. And perhaps that can explain a little bit about why teens seem so strange online. The next question that Dana Boyd talks about is, why do youth share so publicly? And I would even go as far as, why do some of our friends share so publicly? Have you ever thought that when you go through your Facebook feed and you think,
yeah, did I really need to know? They just want to
yes.
Who cares?
Yes, I don't need to know that you made a pot roast for dinner, really. It's not life-changing, it's not mind-blowing to me. But why do youth share things so publicly? And in the same vein, you know, social media is set up to be very public by default, right? It's up to you to make it private through your own efforts. Filtering, as teens would say, so according to teens, filtering is up to the audience. You filter through my feeds. That's not my responsibility to filter through my feeds because you weren't my intended audience to begin with. So some of the students that she interviewed had said, well, why are teachers even looking at my Facebook profile? Don't they have something else to do? Why are they looking at what I did last week? And so that's the mindset that they're coming into when they're facing social media. And then the next is controlling access to meaning rather than privacy. So this was really interesting. It made me think about, you know, when we were kids, remember how you learned to speak Pig Latin as kind of your secret code of talking to your friends? Or do you remember when those magic markers came out where you would write clear on a piece of paper, but then you take purple markers and then you color over it and all of a sudden this like magic message comes out from your friends? What Boyd calls social steganography is really what teens are doing today. They're putting a message out, but they're not, the message itself isn't meant to be taken literally. So because they know that their parents or teachers or relatives are looking at what they're posting on Facebook or Twitter or whatnot, they're kind of decoding their message. So rather than saying, you know, I'm really depressed, I'm feeling Drake. So they might say, I'm feeling Drake, instead of saying I'm really depressed, because they don't want mom or dad to start posting, you know, responding to their post and saying, oh, baby, are you okay? You know, mama's gonna make you a pot roast, or, you know, things that would throw off their game to their friends. So they'll instead do this type of code switch, a hidden message that only their friends and people in their cultural circle would understand. So instead of saying, you know, had a rotten day at school, they might post lyrics from a song that explains that. And their friends would get it, and their friends would text message them and say, hey, are you okay? But then their parents and their relatives and older adults or teachers wouldn't see that. There's a couple students in her study that talked about this concept of whitewalling. Has anybody heard of whitewalling before? It was new to me when I came across it. So basically, because teens want to control their privacy and they've had to friend mom or dad or auntie or uncle, because that was, you know, the parameters of having a Facebook account, what they would do is they would post something in the times that they knew their friends would see it, and then they would deactivate their account. So they would whitewall it. And then their parents that try to log on at night just to check upon them wouldn't see it anymore. Or they would clear things off their wall. So teens are getting really savvy. They're finding ways to still share with their friends, but find a way to leverage themselves so not all the different audiences would comment. There's a couple students in the study that said, you know, what is really challenging is I'll post something and then get a couple responses from my friends, and that's my form of engagement with them. And then my parent would post something and then it's dead silent. Because as soon as an adult or a parent or somebody posts, it kind of kills the conversation, right? So another reason why youth share so publicly. So what makes teens so obsessed with social media? Here's a fun infographic. Between 18 and 29, those are really our power users of social media, although I think it's gaining a little bit in the 40s, 50s, and even into the 60s. Teens are highly social, right? I think as creative beings, we're created to be social, we're created to be in community, and that's what teens are doing. They're actually, and she postulates this, she says, they're actually not obsessed with social media. They're obsessed with each other. They're obsessed with staying connected with their friends. They're not addicted to social media. They're addicted to each other. They want to be with each other. They want to hang out all the time. And, you know, communities are being built further and further apart, or students are commuting further to school. So oftentimes, students today, you know, in high school, their schedules are packed from morning to night between school, practice for sport, tutoring, musical lessons. They don't have time to have face-to-face with their friends anymore, so they're connecting on social media. And then for teens, this is an alternative to getting together in person if that's not possible for them. Another reason that I was considering as we think about teens being on social media, have any of you come across the hashtag FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out? So students are afraid that, you know, their friends are doing something, they're not able to be there, so they'll be on social media and kind of live vicariously through them. So I recommend Dana Boyd's book. It's called It's Complicated. She paints a great backdrop for us to start thinking about the way social media is used by our teens today. So every fall, we've participated at Biola University for quite a few years in this study conducted by UCLA. It's called the UCLA Harry True Freshman Survey. Harry stands for Higher Education Research Institute. And so as they've evolved every single year. They started asking questions that are a little bit more relevant to our students. So we administer this survey and we participate in, I think there's over like 260 colleges and universities nationwide. I think they had over like 160,000 freshmen participate this past fall. But a new question that was included in the survey, and this is with our freshman students that came in fall of 2013, there was a question that asked them how many of them actually used internet for research or homework. So there's no doubt, we had 772 incoming freshmen last fall. Over 80% of them actually use the internet very frequently for research or homework. That's probably not a huge surprise to most of us. I feel bad for encyclopedia companies that aren't being used. I remember I really wanted a whole set. That was kind of a dream gift for me that I never got growing up. But there's the internet now, so we can just Google it. The next question was, let me see. Oh, here we go. Okay, usage of online instructional websites. 39% of our students said they used it occasionally, 30% said frequently, 31% actually don't use online instructional websites to learn something new or add to their understanding at all. I actually see this increasing as time goes on. I think students are going to be tapping into that, particularly with channels like the Khan Academy on YouTube that can teach you anything from stats to molecular biology. And really, I think students are going to be leveraging these options and these resources for themselves online. What I really wanted to look at, well, this made me happy because I thought, well, that still keeps us employed. Right? For those of us that teach, we're not completely being replaced by YouTube channels that teach for us. But this is, again, with our incoming freshmen of over 700. There was a question that asked, or two separate questions, and I kind of consolidated them both. Time spent online using social networks per week, how many hours per week, versus studying and homework. And what was eye-opening is 30%, so almost 1/3 of our students incoming freshmen spent the same amount of time online, some sort of social media outlet, as studying and homework. I'm kind of curious, the 17% that said that they don't spend any time, I think they're actually lying. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine that there's still 17% of students that aren't spending any time online. But what is concerning is the 2% that's spending more than 20 hours a week on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatnot. So as we kind of think about our students that are coming in, the type of students that are coming in, what they're coming in as, social media outlets that they're using, it makes me think about social media in the classroom. I think it's hard to bifurcate pedagogy today from social media. We have to find some way to integrate it. I don't know if I have time to show this particular clip, but if you haven't heard of Jose Bowen, he was actually a dean at SMU, Southern Methodist University, and now is a president in Maryland at Goucher College. But he wrote a book called Teaching Naked, and it talks about how to move technology into your classroom to enhance your teaching and learning. So we actually had him here, not physically, but through the power of media. He recorded a couple clips for us, and I think it was Freddie that went out and interviewed him. I probably won't show this, but basically he's talking to faculty and educators and saying, don't be an alien. Don't be so foreign to your students. You have to somehow leverage technology and social media for your classroom, otherwise students are going to feel so disconnected from you. They're going to feel like you're from another planet, and they're already intimidated when they come onto the college campus by you. Believe it or not, they are. So the chances of them actually connecting with you deeper or actually initiating any type of connection is for you to actually get onto social media. And you'll have to think about what that means for you particularly and how to use that. But he really champions the fact that technology will improve student learning. So for this next segment, I'm going to talk about what I did with my classroom. And it was really interesting because I've taught first year seminar, which is a 1-unit class for incoming freshmen every fall, for 8 years, I think, both for the School of Business and for the School of Education here at Biola. And those kids, I guess they're teens, they're really interesting when they come in. They're a really interesting group of students. I love them to pieces, and they're kind of in this weird stage between being a kid and being an adult, and I think they're still trying to figure it out themselves. So I wanted to try how I can integrate Twitter as a use of social media into the classroom. So I was thinking through this a couple years ago, and I wanted to understand our freshmen. So 94% of first-year college students use some sort of social network site. I'm confident that has increased. And then the power users for Twitter really are minorities and urban dwellers. So if you think about when you went to college, think about that first experience stepping onto campus. I actually, when I went to UCSD it's like 20 years ago, I didn't know a single person. It was like a 33,000 student campus. I didn't know one person. It was very intimidating. It was very overwhelming. And it was very lonely. I felt disconnected. And I didn't even know where to start. So this is a typical semester, I think. So for those of you that teach freshmen, this is kind of the seasons they go through their first semester. So they're coming in August or September. They're ready to learn. Food consumption is high, positive about their GPA, getting lots of sleep. Stress isn't too bad. Still retaining some information those first few weeks in your class. But as October rolls around, there's a change in the amount of sleep they're getting, stress, and it continues to deteriorate, I think, as the semester goes on. Now, if you think about freshmen, most of them come in having their orientation. You have freshman orientation. It's full of fun and silly games. They're in groups. They get to meet people. And it's very social and it's very engaging, right, for those few days that they're on campus. But what happens after orientation is over? All of a sudden, they're hit with the stark reality of school has begun. Have you bought your books? Do you have all of your syllabi? You need to get your life in order. The fun is over. And this can really be a harsh reality check for students. They might start feeling really lonely, confused, fearful. I had students start the first day in my class, and they didn't realize they actually had to pay for books. They came to class, and they thought we would hand them books, just like they did in K-12 public school, right? You got your book. And so there's a lot of changes in stark reality for them. This is a group of my freshmen, one of the sections I had last fall, and surprisingly, they still look fairly awake. I think this was taken in November. But US News and World Report actually finds that 1 in 3 freshmen don't come back for their sophomore year. So that's really concerning for me. I want to know what is it about these students that's causing them to leave their university campus. And oftentimes, the reason for these low rates of retention is finances, family problems, but more so loneliness and academic struggle. So just to give you a little bit of information about first year seminar. First year seminar, like I mentioned, is for incoming freshmen, their first year. And the purpose really is to help them feel connected because it's grouped by their major, for those of you that are familiar. And then help them understand about university resources, their major, how to be a successful university student. And every year for the past 8 years when I've had my students come in, I have them fill out a form and I ask them, what's your biggest fear about college? And over 90% of the students say loneliness and failing my classes. Not finding any friends, not making it, and getting kicked out. So the reality is huge for them that they might not find any friends here. So as I started thinking about that, I thought, well, as most researchers do think about, well, is there any theoretical framework that I can put this whole context under? And there's 3 specifically. For some of you that are familiar with student development in higher ed, there's this theory on social learning by Albert Bandura. It was dated in the 70s, actually. And he says that learning happens through observation from what's going on around you, reproduction of what you're learning, so practicing, retention, and then motivation. But as I think about social learning and put it in today's context, I think students learn social learning through social media because they're not always face-to-face anymore. So is there a theory, as I was thinking about, what's social media learning theory? Is there a social media learning theory? The second framework that I thought would really fit where this context goes is Vincent Tinto. And he talks about these 3 stages that students go through when they enter college. So the first is separation, right? Separation from their home, what's familiar. They're moving away to something that's completely unfamiliar. So during this season of separation, it might be slightly traumatic. and it might be hard and challenging for them. But then they move into the second stage, Tinto says, where they start transitioning. So they're becoming a little bit more familiar with the new, but then they're feeling torn between the old and new, right? Where do you call home? Is home here on campus, or is home home? So students are kind of foot in both places, okay? So students begin to feel slowly more disconnected from their old environment. Maybe they don't see their friends or their family as often, but they don't feel a full sense of belonging yet in this transition. And then eventually and hopefully, they move into this third stage, which is incorporation. And they usually, when they enter this stage, feel a complete connection or membership with this new community that they're in. But the question is, how do we get students from separation to incorporation in a healthy way and successfully? That was my question that was brewing in my mind. The third theory out there is Aston's involvement theory. And what Aston says is that students learn and develop when they're actively involved in the collegiate experience. So the more they're involved and the quality of their involvement actually impacts them and actually impacts their academics and their grades. Okay, so as I had these theories swirling in my mind, I thought, well, I think this could work for our freshmen that are coming in. They're probably experiencing the stages of transition. And I thought, okay, what I'm going to try, and I started this 3 years ago just to test it out, but I had 2 first-year seminar sections, and I said, I'm going to start a Twitter account, and I would like you to start one as well, and I would like you to follow me, and I'm going to follow you. I had like 2 students out of 34 that semester that did that, and I thought, okay, that was a complete and utter fail. So how can I do this again? And I want it to work somehow. So not this past fall, but fall of 2012 was my pilot study. So again, I had 2 sections, and I had about 32 students among the 2 sections. And I said this time, you're required to create a Twitter account, and you're required to follow me, and you're required to follow each other. This will comprise your attendance and class participation grade. So it worked so much better when you implement it into your class that way. They had no choice, but it was good for them. Like broccoli, you have no choice, you have to eat it, but it's good for you. So I made some tweaks this past fall, and I did this again. And I always ask the students, how many of you have actually heard of Twitter? How many of you have not? And this was surprising to me because in fall of 2013, which was this past time, 89% of my students had heard of Twitter. It was about 45 the year before. So we know that Twitter is kind of coming on the scene. Students are using it a little bit more. My sample had 2 first-year seminar classes in elementary education, and this ran for 12 weeks, okay? So, all right. So for those that had heard of Twitter, I asked how many of you actually use Twitter, have an account and tweet. So this time, 44% actually had an account. They're ready to go. They're familiar. So their learning curve wasn't as steep this time around. In addition to that, of those that actually had a Twitter account, 36% of the students tweeted more than 5 times a week. And from my pilot study, I found that 5 was kind of the sweet spot. I thought, well, maybe I'll have them tweet 10 times a week, and then they thought it was too much. That first year where I had like 2 followers, I left it up to them, and that didn't work so well for me either. 27% of them tweeted less than 1 time a week. So I thought, okay, I think I'm going to try 5, see if that works. And the parameters were basically this. So each of my students had to set up a Twitter account. They were required to follow me and each other. So they were required to follow everybody in their class section, but I made it optional for them to follow the other class section. They're all elementary ed students, and I gave them that option. So I posted on Canvas all the Twitter handles so they can go ahead and follow all of those students. Again, they're required to tweet at least 5 times a week. And I just threw out some categories for them to tweet about. I said, tell me about how your week is going. What are you learning in your class? Ask a question. What are you feeling challenged by? What do you want to share with your peers? What do you think would be helpful for them to know? What do you want to just share about yourself? We had a hashtag for the class, which I found immensely helpful. So the hashtag was Biola FIS for first year SEM. Some of them asked, well, can we connect to Instagram? Can we post our pictures? Like, sure, why not? And then what I wanted to do was ensure that they knew I was listening and aware that they were tweeting. So what I did was weekly top 10 tweets. So every time our class met, I would have top tweets of the week. And I cannot tell you how elated they were when they saw their tweet being showcased that week. There's one week that I forgot to do that. I didn't hear the end of it, so I had to do twice as many the following week. So just to give you an idea of what freshmen kind of tweeted about throughout the semester, let's see if I could put these words into action. Library, just drinking tea and water, getting up early. So they kind of shared about what was going on for them. Nation Ball, I had never heard of this until I came to Biola. It's like the massive dodgeball competition where they get dressed up in costumes, and it sounds like mad fun. But so many of them tweeted about Nation Ball. They tweeted their costumes, what they're wearing, their dorms. So that was quite a popular one in the middle of the semester. Some other tweets. My brain is telling me to study, but my body is telling me otherwise. Have you ever wanted to go somewhere to worship? Reminders for Spanish chapel. So some of them talked about opportunities and activities that were going on campus. Some of them were just sharing about possibly the challenges of being a student and studying. But what was really great that I found for my class particularly was as I combed through these tweets, I knew how to start the class the following week. So if a lot of them were talking about having trouble getting themselves to study, or if they're faced with procrastination, having a hard time working through their procrastination, we would talk about, just for the first 5 minutes of class, share some good study skills. What can you share with your peers? Yeah?
Just going to ask you basic things. I haven't barely touched this. So with the hashtag,
Uh-huh.
how do you, so you're able to kind of organize all these tweets that all those kind of show up in one section?
Yeah, so
How does that work? I understand the hashtag.
on Twitter, you can search a hashtag and you can follow your hashtag.
Okay,
So instead of combing through every single tweet,
yeah, because whenever I get all these millions of tweets, I don't know how to
yes. So that was the way that I could quickly search all of my students' tweets. I would just follow that hashtag and it would show me all the tweets that had that hashtag from my class that week. You can just put it in the search box on the top right and just,
you put it in there, then that just comes up. Okay.
yeah. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to use Twitter, because it would be a fast way for me to search what my students were tweeting that week. Somebody asked me before, well, how long do you spend on Twitter every single day? Like 12, 15 minutes maybe. Like any type of social media, you could get sucked in for hours, so you would have to pace yourself. Some other tweets that came out, I am not going to take a class that goes to 10:30 p.m. ever again. I actually didn't know we had classes that went to 10:30. So things that students are learning and probably sharing with their peers, don't do this, it's not a good idea. Some of the ministries that they're involved with Tijuana, I think that was one of the ministries. And this really reminded me of what Tinto's Stages talked about. So this student had tweeted this end of October, actually, back in California after going back to Washington for the weekend. It's pretty clear Biola has become my new home. And it made me think about those stages that students go through as they transition to being connected into this new community. What I found particularly helpful, and I'll share a little bit more about this, is when faculty talk about Twitter being so much work, I actually combat that with, it's actually going to be less work for you. Because as students start posting questions and their peers in their class are following them, they're going to answer those questions for you. I don't know if this happens to you, but during the semester, you get flooded with emails all the time, right? Some of us spend 3 hours in the beginning of our day just responding to emails. How exhausting. Have the students respond to each other. They're listening, they're watching, they'll respond to each other. So this was a great example of that when students did that. Some other examples talking about the CAF. You know, that time of the year when it seems like all of your students are sick at the same time, communal living perhaps, going to the health center, and then scary writing an email to your English professor. I found that really cute and endearing. But again, these were ways for me to quickly engage with them the first minute they stepped into class for that week, because I was listening throughout the week. Some other things the students tweeted about, New Testament flashcards. It seems like a lot. That was one tweet. And then another one, you know, students are turning 18, some of them, when they come to Biola. they're stepping into full adulthood. And so we talk about, this was a great one for us to enter into the conversation of what does it mean to be 18 and a legal adult? What responsibilities have you now assumed? What does that mean for you? And so it was just a great way to really start class, and the students loved it because they felt like, one, you were listening and you knew them, that you were aware, and that you could connect with them quicker when class begins. So I think you had asked up here in the search box, so I just did a quick snapshot the other day. This is, if you don't have a Twitter account, this is kind of what it looks like, and these were some of the recent tweets. This is really interesting because I don't know, for some of you that have a Twitter account, I often tweet and I just don't think anybody's listening, except students during the semester when they're required to follow you. So for those of you that watch the ESPN Spelling Bee, I get geeked out on that because I realize how many words I don't know. But I was watching the Spelling Bee last week. It was last week, I think. And it got to the final two students that were spelling just amazing words that I didn't even know existed. And and I enjoy just reading tweets that are going on with some of these events or like the NBA finals or whatnot. And I started seeing a slew of racist remarks against these two Indian American kids that were the finalists. And I just thought, wow, we don't live in a post-racial society. So I just, tweeted, I said, just because their face isn't white doesn't make them any less American. And I would just like to say, you never know where your tweet is going to show up. So the next day, we had a few friends email us. One was my husband's best friend. He said, I think your wife, her tweet just got cited in the Washington Post. You might want to look at that. And I thought, well, my husband was screaming in the other room first, and I thought something terrible had happened. And so, again, this is a great reminder because Twitter has been used for immense good, I think, in some societies. Now there have been people of high stature that have maybe lost their jobs because of some of the things that they tweeted. So just leveraging Twitter and figuring out, how can I use this for good and not for evil? But I often get the question of, how did you comb through all of these tweets on a weekly basis? So I said, I often respond, just follow the hashtag. It makes your life so much easier. But for this particular study, I actually wanted to gather every single tweet that my students had tweeted that semester. And initially I thought that's kind of a Herculean task, but I found this lovely site called All My Tweets. I don't know how many of you are familiar with All My Tweets. Basically, it's a free site. You put your handle in and it shows every single tweet that you've ever tweeted. I think there's a maximum at like 1,000 or more than that. So I thought, okay, if I need to analyze, and this is for my research project, I wanted to analyze every single tweet that my students had tweeted that semester and see if there's any common themes that came up. So went into All My Tweets, logged in, and then I put the handle of every single one of my students. And it gave me a page like this because Twitter doesn't give you a text page like this. So I put in their handle. It generated a whole page of all their tweets. I didn't include any of their retweets or their replies. So it was just their own initial tweet. So I did that. I downloaded into a Word doc all of their documents that showed all of their tweets. And then I worked with a software developer to upload and run a program that would show me common words that came up for all of my students in their tweets, and it kind of gave me by numerical order how often that came up, and I'll show that in a second. So at the end of my semester with my students, I gave them a survey because I wanted to know, how was this Twitter experience for you? I gave them a 36-question survey. 30 of them were on a Likert scale, and then 6 of them were open-ended because I wanted to know some of their responses. And then I conducted 2 focus groups with my students that were an hour each, just to dig a little bit deeper into their use of social media and how it was used for this class. So in the semester, there were 2,521 tweets this past fall from my students. The hashtag yay was used 1,105 times. So not as much as I'd like, but I think it's increasing. On average, there are 114 tweets that I look through every week before class. What are they tweeting? So most often the students are tweeting about classes and studying, which makes sense, their first semester as they're adjusting, and then about campus events like Nation Ball or Chapel or something common was like the Tory conference that came up in the fall. And then dorm life, anything related to what was happening in their dorms. A lot of them talked about their roommates and some of the things they're learning or the struggles that they're facing with their roommates. And then I'm surprised. I started thinking, are they really transitioning away from home and finding a new community? Because the amount of tweets on home and family started decreasing. So after I ran that program, I looked at what were some of the common top hashtags from students other than Biola first year SEM, okay? College, tired, Disneyland, Biola, oh well, procrastination, blessed, and studying. And I thought, what does this tell us about our incoming freshmen? But I just thought that was really fun just to see what are some themes and categories that are emerging from the tweets. So the next few slides are going to be just some data from the surveys and the open-ended questions that I had in the survey for the students. I wanted to know what were their tweeting habits? How often did they tweet that semester? Okay, so the majority of them tweeted about once every other day, some a little bit more, which I thought, okay, maybe they're not spending that much time online. But most tweets were between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. Some trickled into 1 a.m. in the morning, which probably explains the tired hashtags. This was actually very interesting to me. So when I did this, the pilot study in fall of 2012, 60% of the students tweeted off their smartphone. But then by this fall, a year later, 89% of them are on their smartphone. And I wanted to ask the students in the focus group, so tell me how you use your smartphone. And they basically said, we don't really use our laptops or computers anymore. It's kind of archaic. We do that for word processing and classwork, but other than that, we're just on our phones. So we're definitely a high mobile society now. I asked them, in addition to Twitter, what other forms of social media do they use, and quite a few of them use Instagram, and then Facebook. I actually was surprised at Facebook, and I allowed them to check more than one, so quite a few. Very few blogging, and then I started thinking about, well, if faculty are using videos and blogs, that might not be the best avenue for incorporating technology in the classroom. So I wanted to know, the question was, did you like and prefer that your professor communicate through Twitter for class assignments, announcements, or reminders? And so 85% of the students actually agreed and strongly agreed. And I probed a little bit further into the focus groups and I said, why? Don't you like when I post it on Canvas or send you an email? And they said, no, because we don't log on to that. Okay. So then I asked, well, what is it about Twitter? And they said, well, you know, if you look at your phone, my phone's in my bag, but if you look at the phone, those little red dots by the app, they bother us. It tells us and calls us to click on them. They're like, it's quick, it gets our attention, versus like email where I have to log in and then read your email. And I thought, huh, interesting. So they definitely liked Twitter as a form of communicating with them. The question next was how connected you felt with your professor because she was on Twitter, and did you feel more connected to her than any other professor that wasn't on Twitter? And so again, the students actually really felt that way. They said, you know, it was helpful that I knew my professor was listening to me and knew that I had a life outside of class. Now, what was surprising to me, and the students had shared this in the focus group, they said, you seem normal, you seem human. And it reminded me of what Jose Bowen said about, you know, don't be an alien to them. They want to know that you're actually a human. And they said this, they said, it was good to know somebody outside the Biola bubble. I thought, oh, okay. And so two other things that came up, and I thought, well, initially going into it, I thought, well, I'm using this to get to know my students more, but I didn't realize that they felt the same way in reverse. And so they, you know, the second week of school, I got into a car accident on the freeway on the ride home, and I tweeted that night. And I didn't see any of my students respond to that at all. But the next week, as I stepped into class, they said, are you okay? I saw that you got into a car accident. So I thought, they're actually listening to you as much as you're listening to them. So in the focus group that we did actually in the spring, they said, you know, it was really good to know that you got into a car accident only because I knew the following week you might be having a hard time, or maybe you were more tired or stressed. So it helped us to be a little bit more empathetic towards you. That was really interesting. Another one that they had brought up was, some of our friends gave us tickets to a Laker game, and we got to sit behind the team, the first row behind the team, which was like a dream of mine. And so, I took a picture, tweeted that, and they went nuts. And so they brought it up in the focus group. They're like, you have a real life. You just don't teach here. You actually do fun things. And I thought, yeah, because I'm normal, I'm human. So it goes two ways. It's not just us connecting to them, but they actually are connecting back to us, and they're listening. Couple other slides in this area. 85% of the students said they really enjoyed learning about their classmates' freshman experience through Twitter, and then 78% of them said they really just enjoyed learning about their peers in their class. And I asked them why. Why is this a better form of learning about your peers? And they said, well, you know how you go into class every week, and they talked about history classes or whatnot. They said sometimes the classes are really large, you don't get to know anybody, and we would sit in the same place for the entire semester. So we know maybe one person next to us, but we don't talk to anybody else. This way we actually got to know people that were in our class that we might not normally talk to. And they said it's actually less intimidating. Now that you know something about them, you would go up to them and say, hey, I saw that you tweeted this. I saw that you liked, I don't know, such and such. And they felt like it was a good way to start conversation, that they might not have done so if they didn't have the opportunity to learn about their peers. The I in Twitter. So I wanted to ask them, did you feel like you can openly share about your life? And surprisingly, the year before in 2012, there are more students that actually disagreed with that, but I'm finding now that the students are agreeing a little bit more. They feel like they can openly share. And it draws me back to what Dana Boyd talked about. They'll share publicly. It's up to you to decode what's going on beneath that. Okay. 71% of the students said they love sharing about specifically their freshman year through Twitter. And activities and events, it was kind of a draw. 30% of them felt like it was a good way to hear about activities and events, but they said there's the AS Facebook page and other avenues for that. What was really crucial for me in this process was knowing whether or not they felt a deeper sense of community among their classmates because they used Twitter. And 66% of them said they felt a deeper sense of community with their classmates. And then 60% of them said, between agree and strongly agree, that they felt a deeper sense of community with the Biola community at large. What was really great was after these two sections of first year sem ended, the students felt so connected, they decided to still meet every week together. They started having weekly dinners with each other, and I thought, that's beautiful. But again, I feel like Twitter is a good way to start the conversation, but it shouldn't be a monologue or an isolated conversation. It's a way for them to develop deeper relationship and conversation with one another. Again, did they have a great time tweeting? They did, more than the year before. And then I asked them if they thought the college and the community here at college could really learn and benefit from following them on Twitter and reading about their tweets. A little over half of the students said yes. It was a good place, they said, for their voice to be heard. Whether or not anybody was listening, it was good to just put it out there. So I get this question a lot. People ask me, well, why Twitter instead of Facebook? Why didn't you create a Facebook page? And for me personally, I thought, well, Twitter is quick. Privacy settings are so much easier on Twitter than on Facebook. And I wanted their comments to be really short. I didn't want to read a paragraph and then like 6 pictures. I wanted it to be quick and short. And I thought it was easy for them to log on, create an account. So I asked them again in the focus group, I said, Twitter versus Facebook for class, what would you prefer your professor use? So students actually said, well, Twitter is great because it's quick, it's minimal. So it started confirming some of the hunches I had. They said it's not an extensive profile. You don't know where that person went to high school. You don't know what their mom ate for dinner. It's not extensive. You don't need to know about all the movies they've liked. They said you can tailor it to what you want. You're only following people that you really want. And they said, the students were so hilarious. They said, what's really weird on Facebook is you'll meet someone once and they'll say, hey, I'll Facebook friend you. And then you automatically, it's a two-way relationship, you're friends. But on Twitter, you can follow someone and they don't have to follow you back. Or someone might follow you and you don't have to follow them back. There isn't that friend feeling. they said it was great for smaller classes. And I said, what's small? They said, maybe less than 30 would be good. They said it's a great alternative to emailing your professor because they said your professor will probably respond quicker on Twitter. I'm like, well, that might be true. It was true for me when I saw it. I thought, okay, I should respond to them. And they also said, I don't even think professors read their emails. And I thought, well, they do, just not as quick as you want them to. And they just genuinely felt like it was a better option for reminders for classes. Now I said, well, what about Facebook? Isn't there any redemptive value to using Facebook? They said, well, a lot of campus groups already use Facebook, so it's kind of inundated. But they said the Facebook groups work well, or Facebook pages work well for very large classes where you're not trying to engage with one another, but it's just more for information. They expounded so long on this second point. They said, you know, honestly, it's very awkward for student-professor relationships. They said, I don't want to know that my professor went on a date or what they're going to do next weekend. So they actually feel the awkwardness of knowing too much about you. And then in the same vein, they said, I don't want them to know so much about me. I don't want them to see my pictures from high school or who I dated when I was in the 10th grade. And I thought, okay, that does make it very awkward. Again, too extensive to share with others. Easily a time waster. I think somebody had said time consuming or yeah. So when they said, well, you know, for the Facebook pages, you log on to Facebook, and then after you look at, you know, the page for your class or whatnot, then you start browsing and looking at people's profile, and then hours pass. So they said Facebook is a time waster. Twitter, you don't tend to linger and browse for as long. And then they said, and I don't know, perhaps you might agree with this too. They said when you look at someone's profile, it could definitely change your view of the person. You might like them less once you dig into their profile. So that was a reason why they didn't want Facebook. But they said still a good option for reminders. Depends on the size of the class, the purpose of using social media. And then as I bring it home, these are some of the open-ended responses I had from the students. In general, I said, tell me about your Twitter experience. Just go ahead, put anything out there. Some of the students said, you know, it was great to get to know one another, find common interests. It was helpful when I had questions, as you saw in that stream of conversations, responding about the quiz. Some said, I already do enough social networking, and that's probably very true. Maybe that 0.7% that spends more than 20 hours a week. They said it was interesting to see that they, professors, were normal people, so they really enjoyed that. It was a great way to learn about others in their class, their community. It was great to know what was going on in Biola, branch out to different events. Some said it was inconvenient, which could be true for some. And actually, I asked the students in that survey, how many of you plan to still continue using Twitter? And almost half of them, over 50% of them said, and I've seen their tweets throughout the rest of the year, so they're still using it. So I felt like I was getting to know the people outside of class and almost talking to everyone indirectly. And in that focus group, when I said, what should faculty know about social media? It was a resounding, they should just know that's how we talk today. That's our means of communication. I asked the students, because I'm always curious, how did you know what to tweet? And some of them said, you know, something meaningful, food at the caf, whatever was important or memorable, whatever came to mind. What I thought others would want to hear about, anything interesting or exciting, and then this, something on my mind that I can't share on Facebook often because relatives are on Facebook. The next slide on influence your experience. How did it influence your experience as a freshman? Sorry, that one's a little dark. So many of them felt like it was a great way to bring further community in the class. They talked about how it's a good reminder that they're not the only one going through things, that they realize other freshmen are doing dumb things just like they are. Made me not doubt myself as much. Helped me see how other freshmen were doing in this new environment so I didn't feel like an alien. And I knew more about my professor in this class than others did, and it helped me see that I wasn't sinking under all the stuff I had to do. So it's a good place for them to support one another. If you are thinking about including or incorporating Twitter into your class, this is just what I've learned from doing this 2 years, with the first year totally bombing, and then the pilot year and this past year. Clarify your purpose. Definitely don't stick it in just for the sake of including social media. Think about what the purpose is. Is it because you want to use it to convey information, or do you want to bring community? Is it a place for students to be challenged and support one another? So think about that, and then explain your parameters or define your parameters. How many tweets, how often, what are the expectations for students? I think the more clear you are, the more they're able to engage in this assignment. Ensure followers, so you can't build relationships unless there's one that exists, right? So I actually have them look and make sure that they're following each other, following one another, others are following them. Regularly interact, and I can't emphasize how key that is. Unless you're interacting with them, it kind of falls dead and silent. So regularly interact with the students. Have a hashtag for your class. It makes it easy to search through all of those tweets. And again, let them know you're listening. So I would favorite some of their tweets or retweet some of their tweets or reply to some of them. Top 10 tweets, just highlighting some of them each week in your class would be very helpful. They really enjoy that and look forward to that. But again, it's a great way to build a good class community. There's a theory called from Stanford on college students and learning. They said, the greater the challenges, the more support students need. And that seems reasonable, right? But if you have too much challenge and not enough support, students become very frustrated. If you have too much support and the challenge isn't very high, then they get completely bored. So think about your class in the context should you want to include social media, and think about the challenge and support that would come into play based on your class content and whether or not Twitter would work for that. So we have some time left. I'm available and open to take any questions if any of you have questions. Yeah, Carol.
Did you ever switch over to Instagram, seeing so many of them using it?
I've thought about that. Yeah, I think I'll have to mull over that a little bit more. But yes, they definitely use it. More than 50% of their tweets, I would say, they've kind of linked the two. So, yeah. But if you've done that with your class, I'd love to pick your brain.
It just made me think of it. That was great.
Were you getting the 5 tweets per week? You said that was that a minimum goal, and then did you? 5.
Some of them tweeted more. I had students in the 11 weeks that we had class. For some of them, they had over 900 tweets. So some of them were huge users. Some of them just kind of hit the minimum amount.
They hit the 5 that hurt their participation.
Yeah, so I actually had them base it on honesty. So when they sign in for the class, they sign in, and there's a column that said, did you tweet your 5 tweets for the week? And they would sign if they did or they didn't. Now that there's all my tweets, you can actually have them printed out at the end of the semester. As I was thinking through this, should I do this again? Have them log on to all my tweets, print it out, and it'll show the number of tweets they had. So, yeah, Karen.
One thing I've noticed being a K-12 teacher, I have a lot of students who are getting off Facebook and using Facebook as a receptacle for tweets. So I was wondering if you've noticed that with your students. Meaning they're basically using Facebook as a Twitter feed.
I've seen that for some of them. I don't friend students, so yeah. So
But they haven't told you? Or, yeah.
They haven't told me, but that would be a really interesting question to ask. Yeah. Yeah, Tamara.
Can I just ask for a clarification? You
Sure.
said that 50%, you felt like at least 50% of your students afterwards said they'd continue using Twitter. I thought at the beginning you said they came in and there were close to 50% of them saying they were already using it.
Right.
Do you think that means that the same number that were using it before are continuing to use it? Or
Perhaps.
do you think that there was some kind of trend?
Yeah, I mean, if they were using it, and I wanted to know how frequently they were using it. Obviously, for my class, they had to tweet at least 5 times. I don't know if they're still tweeting that regularly anymore. I've seen a couple of them where over the past few weeks as school has gotten out, but I don't know if it's 50%. I just wanted to ask them, will you continue to use this? And perhaps it's the same 50% that's continuing. Perhaps some of them got burned out after doing it for the class. I don't know. Any other questions?
And then how do you set up a hashtag? Is that an easy thing to do? Like Biola, how do you do that?
It's just self-created. I just told my class that's the hashtag for our class. So
Okay,
if you're,
every time you do a tweet, you just automatically write that in, and then you can sort by that.
yes,
Okay, got it.
yes. That's a huge time saver too.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.